All right, guys, so today I'm going to take you on a journey through time, through human history, but our own. We're going to make our own little slice of human history in Civilization 6, which now has a Frontier Pass available. You can get the Frontier Pass on Steam, Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and the Nintendo Switch, so be sure to check that out via the link below. And guys, what the Frontier Pass is adding is new civilizations, game modes, and other content throughout the next year. But what we're going to be trying to do here today is we're going to try to get a space race with a new civilization, the Mayans. We're going to try to get through the science tree, launch ourselves into space, and get a Mars colony going. But before we do that, I do want to say thank you to 2K for sponsoring this video. Well, let's go ahead and jump right in. Enjoy the show. All right, so I started off the game as the Mayans on an Earth map, so see if you guys can figure out where I am already. I actually didn't catch on to it right away as I went to go navigate to figure out where I wanted to put my first city, but I knew I wanted it to be near the water. So I settled my first city, which turned out to be, guys, yes, right in the Chicago area itself. Right now I had a warrior that was exploring the rest of the land. Turns out that we were going, more towards the west coast, and we encountered some barbarians right off the bat, but while doing so, we discovered our first great work. Now, this is something that you could use kind of to your advantage as time goes on, especially if you're getting into faith in the game. There are faiths that you can use. You could try to win with a religious victory, but I was going to be completely focused on the science side of things. Now, my advisor had noticed that we ran into the Vatican City. Yes, it turns out the Vatican is actually on the northwest coast of the United States in this game, but she wanted us to work with the Vatican City so that we could build a better relationship with them and get rewards later. Now, for me, my whole objective was really just scouting out the world. I wanted to find out where the resources were, where other civilizations were, because I was surprised when I looked around, I didn't see a whole lot in the way of anyone to interact with. I had 2 city-states nearby, that was it. Now, much like any other Civ game, I had to manage my research and also my government. So I had to select different cards that would determine my military policies and economic policies as I went along. Now, I was already scouting out to try to figure out where I wanted to build my next city, because I knew that given that I had all this range to work with, it was a ripe opportunity to expand as quickly as I could. So I decided to put my next city down near what would essentially be Louisiana, except in this case, we're the Mayans, and we settled with Uxmal. I decided to use all the default, names, by the way, and then I hit the classical era. This opened up once I got horseback riding, which I knew I was going to need because I obviously was very far away from other civs. Now, I went and made my third city a little bit west of Chicago. And off to the east, I ended up having to deal with some barbarians. Barbarians, just like any other Civ game, they will come at you in the early game especially and try to make life difficult. And then we finally met our first Civ.
Und herrsche über Deutsche und Welsche Lande, über Burgund und manche mehr. Ich weiß wohl, dass auch ihr kundgeherrschen mit rechter Gewalt.
So initially, I wanted to, be on good terms with him. He ended up showing me where his city was. There was Aachen. And that was his pride and joy. That was his capital city. Now, we also found out there was another city-state down there, and we found Trier. I hope I'm saying that right. I don't know if I am, but that was another city that he had. Now, it was obviously clear to me that Germany was settling in South America, so I knew that I had North America, and again, I had the strategy where I was going to be trying to go the route of horsemen and essentially knights. So after founding another city and building up some relationships with city-states, Germany came to me and threatened me. He essentially said to aid that city-state is to invite death. And if you had a chance to watch my last series, you found out that when Germany starts to threaten you, it usually leads to war. Now, I had other things on my mind. I was still dealing with the barbarians. I was using my special unit. The Mayans have a unit that replaces archers that's actually pretty good in the early game. So we were able to put the pressure on the camps to the northeast and try to clear it out. That way we wouldn't have any distractions for if we had to go to war down in South America. If you've never played Civ, essentially we had to clear out the units from the camp, and once we move into the camp, we would take it over. Now, around this time, I hit the medieval era, and this is where I was able to finally start making my way towards knights, because I knew I had horses, and that was the next step. Now, unfortunately, Germany again came at us aggressively. They were telling me, don't help their enemies. As far as I was concerned, I really wasn't. I was trying to focus on taking out barbarians, expand my empire, but again, the Germans in this game, they just were not playing nice with me. It was almost like deja vu with the last episode that we did. Now, I settled my next city in the far southwest, more towards California-ish area, and then I brought out my knights. It was time to go to battle, clear out the rest of the barbarians once and for all. Even though I had taken out the camp before, they kept on coming. They actually had some sort of like camp across the ocean, and they kept sailing over with units, but they were no match for my knights. And the beautiful thing about knights really is their mobility. You can get them across the map fairly quick. Other units can only move once per turn typically, unless they're a scout. But horsemen and knights are able to move multiple. Now, it was around this time after I decided to clear out this last scout that I decided I wanted to see what was in the rest of the world. You can see my mini-map in the lower left side. I decided, you know what, I'm going to sail across the ocean. I'd finally gotten the technology for sailing, and this enabled me to cross through open waters. This is where we were going to finally discover the rest of the world, which obviously, given that we know this is an Earth map, we were heading towards Africa.
Welcome to the United States of America. If you conduct yourself well, you can consider us friends.
Needless to say, that was very reassuring, especially after the issues that we had when we were dealing with Germany. Teddy came off very nice. He invited us to see one of his cities, and of course we wanted to. He showed us St. Louis before we even explored it on our own. Now, it actually turns out that Teddy was not alone on that coast.
John Curtin, I speak for the people of Australia as their Prime Minister. We seek sympathetic allies in the fight against the hawks of war.
That's right, we met John Curtin as well from Australia. So not only did we run into America, but also Australia back to back. So we had two potentially new allies, which made me think, you know what, I should go ahead and take over the rest of America. So we decided to declare war on Germany.
Wie wollt ihr an mir gesiegen, der ich so viel der Feinde verdurbe?
And we were actually able to do this without too much of a warmonger penalty because he had just recently denounced us. So I decided I was going to move all my units south and try to capitalize off the fact that he probably didn't have too many cities with walls yet. We found Ulm in Central America. So we got our knights in position to attack. Obviously, didn't have any sort of city walls, so knew that by the next turn we'd be able to move in. Now, the only thing I didn't really think out was the fact that I would probably need siege weaponry at some point. Because while Ulm didn't have much in the way of defenses, allowing us to essentially move in and attack the city at will, we were certain that at least as we approach the capital, we'd be encountering more resistance. Now, Ulm did fall pretty quickly. Once these knights kept moving in, they whittled down the troops, and eventually we took the whole city by force, giving us not only that property, but also any of the improvements that he had already made to it. Next, we turned our sights on Mayans. Mayans was another big city. Not only did Mayans have a city wall, but it also had only a couple ways to attack the city at any given time. So essentially, it had amazing natural defenses that would make it very, very hard to assault the city. I knew that I had to find a way to work around this attack. Now, just as I was about to relocate my units once again, we got denounced by John Curtin, of all people. This man came at me and he was so upset because I was in a war with somebody that had been denouncing me. Now, obviously, it wasn't my goal to set off a world war, and I was hoping that he would stay out of it. But we marched on because I certainly was not going to give up, especially as we were reaching more and more modern times. We saw that there was oil on the map, for example, near Aachen, and we found another city without any sort of city walls. As we marched toward, I realized what I needed to do: capitalize on every single city I could find that had a lack of defenses. No city wall obviously meant that there were very, very little defenses, except in the way of military units, which I wasn't really running into too many. Germany, along the way, they had at best it looked like warriors, and warriors stood no chance whatsoever to attacks by knights. Before we knew it, we took over Trier, and we had another city in South America that belonged to us.
War can only bring us loss. Loss of lives, loss of productivity, loss of our very humanity.
Now see, I don't think John here knew that we were getting denounced, and I was not going to back off from this war. We were going to continue on until we had every single city, including Aachen, which was going to be the ultimate prize. Now, I did send off units to go look at Nuremberg. Nuremberg actually had no city defenses as well, although they did have some unit defenses in the way of archers. Archers were obviously a problem for my knights, and I didn't really have the best way to attack them because most of my units were beyond a river, and attacking over a river means that you've got less power. Now, while all this was going on, I still had scouts that were out trying to explore the rest of the world, which is when we met the Romans.
Ave viator, Augusta e Roma imperator Caesar Traianus sum. Quis es? Qua et terra patria vocas.
But before we could even try to forge a friendship, we ran into the Colombians as well.
El presidente Simón Bolívar os da la bienvenida a la Gran Colombia.
Now, Grand Colombia is actually the other side to be added besides the Mayans to Civilization 6 through the New Frontier Pass. So we're definitely excited to meet them, and I had high hopes for the relationship.
Petra is a brilliant display of man's artistry in turning barren rock into majestic wonder.
And just like that, guys, we built our first world wonder. Now, I had tried to build other wonders up until this point, but other civs were actually building them faster. So the Petra was the first for me, but then we had one more up our sleeve.
We can roam the bloated stacks of the Library of Alexandria, where all imagination and knowledge are assembled. We can recognize in its destruction the warning that all we gather will be lost.
And we also had ourselves a great library, which is also very, very useful if you're going for something like a science victory, as it helps you towards the technologies you're going to need to get ahead. Now, before we knew it, we found the final civ in the game. So we found the great Cyrus of Persia. Yes, and he was also very, very kind, but the city that he showed us wasn't that impressive. I continued on, marched my way to Aachen, but this time I brought some cannons. We knew we were going to have to try to bust down a wall here at the capital city. He also had himself a world wonder there that I wanted. Now, the bombards that I brought were just a step above catapults and trebuchets, so I knew that I was going to have my work cut out for me. It was clear that the Germans had a very, very decent wall on the city, and my knights were not going to be able to punch through until I did significant damage.
Let's get on our knees and pray. I don't know to whom. Is there a patron saint of...
Alright, so I didn't mean to actually cut that off, but from there, I was able to upgrade my field cannons to something a little bit more powerful once I got back into friendly territory. So knowing this, I knew that I had to get Aachen to fall so that I could go ahead and take it and upgrade my bombards to field artillery at the very least. Now, after many turns of bombardments, I finally reached a point where I was able to march my knights in. As you can see, we whittled down the defenses as best as we could, got it to almost nothing, and then decided to send our forces in. Now, I had a great general backing up my units. I had knights that were actually kind of weak, which I knew weren't going to be the right call, so we sent in one with a little bit more health to hopefully mop things up and finally claim the German capital for ourselves. Now, I thought for a second that these knights were about to lose it, but they came through, and just like that, we took Aachen, the capital city of Germany. Now, a loss like this means that the civilization involved, they're still alive, they're still able to try to survive and try to fight back, but that is such a huge blow for their people. Now, before I could even continue on my battles to take the rest of the cities, we entered the information age and unlocked armor. We had unlocked modern armor, modern AT guns, but I knew that I didn't need any sort of AT gun just yet, so I decided I was going to start to make tanks. We were going to convert our units to modern armor and storm the cities by force. These walls were no longer going to be a threat for us. We were able to march in, take out everything along the way because we had such a difference in power between our units and theirs. Everything fell one by one. Even Mayans itself, with a little bit of some pressure from artillery, we were able to march in a tank and take the city once and for all. Speaking of which, we had these units fully upgraded from all the combat experience that they had. So they were able to attack twice in a row, something that most units can't do until you get them leveled up. And just like that, Mayans was ours. We knew that we only had a couple more cities to take before the German Empire finally fell.
Organisms don't think of CO2 as a poison. Plants and organisms that make shells, coral, think of it as a building block.
And we found ourselves a Great Barrier Reef. As I continue to explore the world, which you can always look at the lower left to see my progress, but we found Australia, and right off the coast of Australia was the Great Barrier Reef. Now, as a last-ditch effort at survival, Germany tried to stop me from taking their final city, which I saw no point in because I knew that it could bite us in the butt later. We decided to march our tanks in and end this conflict once and for all.
Ich pflegte Frömmigkeit und Selde, doch vergesset das. Ihr habt den Sieg errungen. Sie überriech Friedeshasses und des Streites.
And just like that, the German Empire was no more. But wouldn't you know, somebody was about to pop up. That's right. We had Curtis himself show up, and he was furious. He called me a warmonger.
If you go on with this nuclear arms race, all you're gonna do is make the rubble bounce.
So I knew that there was more trouble coming. I researched nuclear fission, which had enabled me to build my first nuclear device. Oh, and by the way, did I mention, I know I didn't show it in the video here, but America declared war on us while we were fighting the Germans. It turns out that the Germans got some sort of relationship going with the Americans, and they tried to jump in to defend them. So what I decided to do was, I knew that I needed a base of operations. I found out that the Amsterdam city-state was friends with the Americans, so of course I was going to take that away from them. I decided it was time to bring almost everything I had from the war with the Germans, including my upgraded tanks. Now, it was risky to do so, because going across the water undefended like this means that you could get intercepted along the way, but you know what? We actually made it to shore okay, which allowed us to start attacking the city with pure force. The defenses now granted, we didn't have our artillery ready, and we had some units that were fighting back, including musketmen, but they still stood no chance against modern armor, especially upgraded modern armor that's allowed to attack twice per turn. So just like that, through a little bit of whittling them down, attacking with the tanks over and over, knowing that their defenses weren't that great, we were able to finally get the city's health down low enough where even without artillery, we'd be able to breach in. Now, this obviously would have been a different story had they had any better defenses, like AT guns, or even any sort of like anti-air from my choppers, but they really didn't have anything that was a true threat to what I brought to the table. I can only imagine how scared Amsterdam was as I came in, just because they were friends with the Americans. But again, great city, lots of upgrades, you can see all the farms around it, and we got to keep all that infrastructure, all that upgrading, we got to keep for ourselves, and at that point, we had direct access to Baltimore. Now, what I quickly found out that America wasn't afraid to strike back. They brought in a little bombard of their own and attacked Amsterdam. They tried to fire a shot, technically the first shot of the war between us and them. But it was all without any sort of purpose, guys, because they just didn't have enough power to stand up against what we brought to the actual continent. Now here we finally see Japan, who unfortunately I lost the footage of while I was actually editing this video, but they were very, very upset with me because we were at war with America, just as we had been with Germany. Again, really not my fault. America declared war on me. We were just defending ourselves at this point, and defend ourselves we did. I sent in everything, including the kitchen sink. There's going to be no stopping us from defending ourselves because we did not want to go to war with America. They wanted to go to war with us. We took a settler unit, which we could have used for later, which I actually did end up doing, and in the same turn, we took out the bombard that attacked Amsterdam. It was at this point I realized that Buffalo was probably going to be the easiest target because it was a smaller city. I saw the walls around Baltimore. They looked like good walls too, so I knew I was going to have my work cut out for me. So I figured, you know what, why not just go in, pop Buffalo, and take out all the artillery units that could have caused me grief later as I was capturing cities. It was not hard to do that. Usually artillery units are not that strong when it comes to defense. As you can see, they're better for city busting, especially once you get them upgraded to more modern artillery. That one shot took down almost the entirety of the walls, which allowed me to just bust right into Buffalo like it was nothing. Now, it was at this point that I realized that much like with Germany, I had a very big power differential between myself and America. And I was going to take advantage of that before they could ever catch up in tech. Because you'd be surprised, if you ever lay off of a civ, if you give them a peace treaty and they hold a grudge against you, they can come back and hit you very hard later when they go and tech up themselves, especially once things like spies become available, where you're able to steal technologies from others. Now, at this point, they were pretty much done. We had busted through the walls enough where my tanks were able to get in, and boom, just like that, we took Baltimore. Next up, we knew we had to find the capital. Now, before I did that, I did have to do a little bit more cleaning up, just so we didn't have any sort of stragglers coming by, trying to attack the weakened cities before we could get them repaired and back up to speed. Now, once I felt comfortable enough moving away from the cities that I had just taken, we headed out, and wouldn't you know, we found Washington, D.C. Now, it too had itself a wall. I also noticed that it had Stonehenge, which I know doesn't match up with history, but either way, I knew that if I took it, we would get the benefits from it as well. Now, of course, I attacked with everything, just as I always had. I had my artillery there, my 2 tank armies that were fully upgraded, and surprisingly, Washington did not stand up. Once we had these tanks that were fully upgraded, we almost didn't need the artillery. All we had to do was just keep busting in with the tanks, and then finally, just like Germany, Washington's capital fell. From there, it was really just a cleanup mission. I knew that I wanted Boston, including Cleveland and Cincinnati. Those 3 cities would have given me all of Central Africa. Now, much like Germany, America came to us wanting to have some sort of peace. He even offered me his jeans. Yes, Teddy Roosevelt was willing to take off his jeans for me and give me a lot of gold. So I gotta admit, it was very tempting. 32 gold for 30 turns, along with a bunch of gold up front. You know, it sounds lucrative, but I figured, you know what? Boston's too juicy to leave behind. I was gonna take it and maybe consider peace later. Now, unfortunately, all of these actions still had consequences with the world. The Romans were very upset with us, as was everybody. It seemed like everybody was upset. But I actually wasn't the one to start this war with America, and I wanted these cities. Once I got done capping the cities that I wanted, I figured that, you know what, maybe we'll let America live to see another day. So I took my armies and I marched off to the east, but before we could make our next attack, we built our next wonder.
Don't watch the big clock. Do what it does. Keep going.
Yes, as I always say, guys, I always tell you guys, keep going. We built ourselves Big Ben. We got another wonder built by our own people. And this wonder actually doubled our treasury. It allowed us to have so much gold that pretty much we had unlimited resources to utilize, almost 10,000 gold. So I marched on in to Cleveland, busted it down just like all the other cities. Although it put up a decent fight, it wasn't enough. I had just one city left in my sights, and that was going to be Cincinnati, straight to the south. Brought my armies down, figured, you know what, we'll take this thing, and then maybe we'll broker peace, because I had noticed that it was getting late in the game. I had noticed that it was 1938 AD, and there's only 250 turns in the game, and I was on turn 180. I figured that if I was going to go for the science victory, I was going to have to get to a place where my cities and the people in the cities that I took were going to be happy.
The whole palace complex is built along a central axis, the axis of the world. Everything in the four directions suspend from this central point, represented by these palaces.
And there we built our next wonder, the Forbidden City. So I ended up, again, not being able to build many wonders in the beginning of the game, but we were able to build so many along the way. Now this is where we finally decided, you know what, we're going to go to Roosevelt and try to broker peace. But I told him, I want everything on the table. I want gold. I want his genes. I wanted him to cede all the other cities so that he would just say, you know what, we're going to let this go. I won't try to get back those cities. They're all yours. So after I negotiated everything possible, he was happy. He said his thanks, and he got to live to see another day.
There are 31 satellites zipping around the world with nothing better to do than help you find your way to the grocery store.
Now, guys, this is where things really started to get exciting because I finally had the means to start my space missions. I built myself a missile silo just for defenses because usually when you go for a victory, the AIs get really upset. Following that, I started building my spaceports. I built 3 in total in 3 different cities on the continents of North America. But next thing I knew, we had a visitor.
¿Puedo daros una advertencia? Cambiad vuestros métodos, o los que lideran los ejércitos lo harán por vos.
Yes, that's right. Grand Columbia, as I told you guys, usually when you start going for a win, usually the AIs get very, very cranky, at least the ones that are still around. So, unfortunately, we knew that Grand Columbia was going to potentially be a problem, but it wasn't going to deter us. All I needed to do was make sure that I had resources available that would stop them from doing any sort of surprise attacks on my main continent. And as part of that, knowing that I had built nukes, I had 2 different nuke types available to me. I built myself a nuclear submarine, and I figured out where Grand Columbia was. We decided to move our nuclear submarine over to his coastline, just in case he decided to try anything fishy. Now, once our nuclear submarine got on his coastline, I knew that I had him stuck, because we had several nuclear missiles at this point ready to go. I had spies also infiltrating his cities to make sure that he wasn't going to do anything to us at the last second.
NASA spent millions of dollars inventing the ballpoint pen so they could write in space. The Russians took a pencil.
And just like that, we were off to the space race. So much like any other space program, we had to take baby steps. We launched our very first Earth satellite, which actually gave us a lot of intel to work with. This is actually one of the coolest things that you can get when you're going for science because it gives you perspective of everything on the world, even if you've not had a chance to explore everything for yourself.
It is not the mountain we conquer, but ourselves.
That also includes any of the world wonders that you might have missed along the way. Like in this case, we found Mount Everest. Now, as I started to look around at the rest of the world, I started to realize that there were some giant civs out there that were doing very well. I had no idea that across the world that there were these other wars happening. I noticed that Rome had taken, for example, some of Japan's cities. Japan didn't really have a whole lot left to work with. It was crazy to see. But I had my sights on other things. We were going to the moon. That's right, we launched the official moon landing. This was the next key step that I had to do in order to make my way towards the science victory, where we got ourselves to Mars. Following going to the moon, we had to go and get ourselves 3 different Mars modules in order to complete the objective and win the game.
Seguir con la guerra es lamentable, pero necesario al lidiar con serpientes como vos.
Of course, Grand Columbia was the one coming at me, and you know what, guys? That called for nuclear war. I decided enough was enough. I was going to hit his cities once and for all. So I saw that he had a bunch of units around Bogota, and I figured, you know what? He's probably going to launch an attack soon from a coastal city. So I decided to go and hit him where it counted. We were going to launch a thermonuclear warhead at Bogota. Get ready for the fireworks, because this is going to be big. Dude. Devastating. Absolutely devastating. It not only took out every unit around that city, but it also irradiated it. It damaged his buildings. It took away all his defenses, killed off a lot of his population, and it even killed off my spy. I also had a ship on the coastline that got wiped out as well. But it was worth it. Now, I knew he was going to be really pissed off at this point, so I had to keep hitting him where it counted. Anywhere that I saw that units were, I had to hit him with the nuke, so they couldn't come across the ocean. This next one I decided to send was a little bit more of a baby nuke. It didn't have quite the range, but it should have been enough to take out the units that he had in the city. And boom, all those knights, everything were gone. Now, I do have to say nukes are beautiful in this game. Even though that's a smaller nuke, it still was very, very devastating. But guys, you might think, hey, you've probably done enough to this guy. But no, I could not have any interruptions with my final space race victory objectives because the game was about to end. We were 25 turns away. So I decided to hit Quito next with another baby nuke. And just like that, a whole other city eradicated. That city got hit so hard that the population fell to 1. Almost no one survived. But guys, you know me, we're not going out without a bang. We had hit him with one more thermonuclear missile. We had one left in our arsenal. And of course, we were going to go for another coastal city just to deter him from coming across the ocean to try to attack my cities. And just like that. Oh, and the game took me away from the view. But yes, we did all the devastation I wanted to do. We made his waters unbelievably toxic and put him in a situation where he was going to have to spend a ton of resources rebuilding everything that he had. And with that, I felt that my job was done. He had become our most immediate threat. He had been denouncing us and threatening us. And I knew that I wouldn't have to worry about him anymore as we pushed through the final turns in the game to launch each of the Mars modules that I needed to win the science victory in the game. As the final turns approached, we launched the modules one by one, starting with Mars hydroponics. This is going to allow us to feed our colony in space, to grow things and thrive, because obviously humans need food. Next up, we launched our Mars reactor. This was going to provide power for our colony mission, much like we need power here on Earth. And in time, I'm sure they would find other ways to get power, but right off the bat, they would be able to do the things they needed to do. And then last but not least, we launched the Mars habitation module, which was going to give the colony a place to actually live. And with that, we completed the science victory, taking one giant leap for mankind once again, and bringing us to the Red Planet to colonize it once and for all.
Much as our ancestors did ages ago, we thrust forward into the unknown. The first pioneers set forth on an uneasy course. And yet once again did our people thrive. Now, under your leadership, we plot a new course and make another world our own.
And there we go, guys. The Mayans stood the test of time. And not only that, we made it to the end game, and we managed to get to Mars. We were the first civilization to reach Mars. Now, guys, this did take 9 hours of gameplay to play through this whole thing. and I crunched it down into 30 minutes. I hope you enjoyed this epic adventure with me. And if you want to see more sometime, let me know, whether it's in a video or in a stream. Be sure to hit that thumbs up button if you enjoyed this, because it did take a lot of time. And once again, thank you to 2K for sponsoring this video. And again, guys, the Civilization Frontier Pass is available now. You can pick it up. Be sure to click that link down below. But that's going to do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you all next time.